Welcome back. From the observation deck, let's look at something the mind does that most of us never name.
The going away dinner is already on the calendar and something in you shifts. You've known this person for 3 years. You've met for coffee a dozen times. You've sent the polite check-in texts, the memes, the "we should actually do this soon" replies that went nowhere. And for 3 years, there's been a version of what you actually want to say that you've kept just slightly out of reach, not hidden exactly, just not offered. Then they get the job offer, or the relationship ends, or the lease runs out in another city. And suddenly, in the last 2 weeks, you have time. You text back within minutes. You make the plans you'd been vaguely suggesting for a year. You sit across from them at the farewell dinner and you ask the real questions, the ones about their childhood and their fears and what they wish had gone differently. And they answer, and you answer back. And the conversation has a quality that most of your conversations don't. You drive home feeling strangely like you've finally met each other. You call it bittersweet. You call it, "we always do this." You might even call yourself bad at maintaining friendships. What you probably don't call it is the only safe condition under which you know how to be fully present with another person. But that might be closer to the truth. This is the pattern worth sitting with. You don't become more loving as someone leaves because you're sentimental. You become more loving because the ending removes the thing you were most afraid of. Mary Ainsworth, in her 1970 research on how infants attach to caregivers, identified something that has quietly organized adult relationships ever since. She found that children sort themselves into distinct attachment strategies based not on their own personalities, but on the consistency of the care they received. Secure children, whose caregivers responded reliably, learned that closeness is safe. Anxious children, whose caregivers were unpredictable, learned to reach loudly and often. And avoidant children, whose caregivers were consistently unavailable or overwhelming, learned something more specific. They learned to want connection and manage that want at a careful distance, because reaching and not being caught felt worse than not reaching at all. You probably recognize a shade of that last pattern in yourself, not because you're avoidant in the clinical sense, but because most people who grew up in relationships where connection sometimes cost something, where being too open sometimes led to disappointment or correction or disapproval, learned a version of the same rule. Keep a little back. Don't lead with the real thing. Wait and see if it's safe first. The problem is that safe first can become a permanent condition. The waiting becomes the default, and the default becomes, slowly, who you are with people. Careful, present enough, but not all the way there. And then someone announces they're leaving and the calculation changes entirely. Think of it like a combination lock that's been holding a door shut. Every close relationship has one. The combination includes, will they use this against me? And will they change how they see me? And will this make things strange between us? The first two require time to answer. They require seeing how someone handles your vulnerabilities across multiple interactions. They require history and risk and the willingness to be wrong about someone. But the third one, will this make things strange, disappears entirely when the person is leaving. The door is already closing. There is no strange between us to protect. The combination unlocks by itself, not because you decided to be brave, but because the conditions that made the lock necessary are gone. This is the goodbye loop. Not a flaw in your character, but a protection mechanism that found the only condition under which it knows to stand down. The ending is the safety. The finality is the permission. Neuroscience has a small piece to add here. The prefrontal cortex, which handles social risk assessment, is constantly running background calculations on the cost of disclosure. How much am I exposing? What's the blast radius if this goes badly? It's not paranoid, it's efficient. Relationships do have social costs, sometimes. The prefrontal cortex learned from experience what the stakes are with this person in this kind of situation, and when someone is leaving, the stakes it's been tracking simply stop applying. The threat model collapses and the guard comes down almost automatically, not through willpower, but through the environment changing. You didn't decide to be warmer at the goodbye dinner. Your nervous system recalculated, and warmth was what came through the gap. So what do you do with this? Not with the pattern itself, which is old and structural and not something you can dismantle in a week, but with the knowledge of it. The first thing worth doing is naming the lock when you feel it, not "I'm being distant again" as a judgment, more like "there's the combination lock." Something in this relationship still feels like the stakes are high enough to keep part of me back. That's useful information. It doesn't mean the relationship is broken. It might mean it's exactly the kind of relationship where the full version of you is scared to show up, which often means it's the kind that matters. The second thing is worth trying more slowly. Pick one person who isn't leaving, someone staying, someone present, someone who will be at your next birthday and probably the one after, and say one true thing to them before there's any reason to. Not a confession, not a reveal, just one honest thing that you'd normally save for the last conversation. "I've been thinking about what you said last month and it stayed with me. I don't think I've told you that this friendship has meant more than I've let on." Something that would feel appropriate at a going-away dinner. Say it when no one is going anywhere. The goodbye loop runs on the logic that honesty is only safe at an ending. The small experiment of saying the real thing before anyone leaves is how you teach your nervous system, slowly, that the door doesn't have to be closing for you to walk through it. There's a third thing, and it's more of a reframe than an action. The people you've shown up for at the farewell dinner, the ones who got the warm, present, real version of you in those last 2 weeks, they got something genuine. It wasn't performed. It wasn't summoned out of guilt. It came up because the conditions were finally right. Which means the capacity for that kind of presence isn't missing in you. It was never missing. It was waiting for the moment it felt safe enough to arrive. Ainsworth's research didn't conclude that avoidant attachment is a permanent character defect. It concluded that it's a learned strategy, built from experience, stored in the body, like a language. And languages can be added to. You don't have to forget the first one. You just have to practice speaking a second one in low-stakes moments until it becomes available in the ones that count. You're allowed to be someone who finds goodbyes easier than hellos. You're allowed to have spent years showing up most fully for the people who were already halfway out the door. That strategy made sense once. It probably kept something safe that needed keeping. But the person across from you at the dinner who isn't leaving yet, who'll still be in your phone next month and the month after, they'd like the real version too. Not all at once. Just one true thing before the calendar says goodbye. Design one small moment of honesty this week while someone is still here. Watch what the nervous system does when the door stays open. I'll see you next Tuesday. If you recognized yourself in any part of this, I'd like to know which moment. The going away dinner, the lock, the last week warmth. Tell me in the comments. I read every one.
Thank you for sitting with this. We are here to keep observing without judgment and with total clarity. I'll see you next time.